Satnam, beautiful Sovereign Sister Satnam, and welcome to the Sovereign Sisterhood Movement podcast, a global movement for generational healing for sovereign sisters like you. I am your co-host, Veronica Barragan, otherwise known as Jyoti Rajit Kaur, and this is my co-host, Elvira Mariscal. How are you, Elvira?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic, especially because we're going to be talking about something that is very important in women's lives today. Don't you agree?
Oh, yes, definitely.
So, today you and I have been talking about kind of like what are the biggest pain points as it relates to the generational healing journey for women. And one of the things that I think a lot of women do not even realize that they carry as an inherited emotional pattern is what we're going to be talking about today. And what I'm referring to is generational guilt. And the reason why this is often a very invisible pattern that we carry from our ancestors, it's because if you think about guilt, it's a very, very strong emotion that causes us to run away, to feel shame, and to feel like we're inherently unworthy. And this is why when you think about generational healing and working through and feeling these emotions that our ancestors couldn't feel, guilt, beyond even fear, which I want to explore with you today, becomes literally the most poisonous toxin that can exist. And so today I think we should start with first talking about what inherited ancestral guilt is. Like, how does it even show up? Why does it show up? And then we'll kind of look at the solutions, right? What are the things that we've done in our lives to deal with this emotion and to learn to release it? So I guess we'll start there. When you think about like inherited guilt, what are the first things that comes to your mind? Because I think that when you hear those words, there's two approaches that we can take. It could be the guilt that we may fear because, or we may have because of the things that our ancestors really did in their past. Like if you had the ancestors who committed crimes or did something that was just very, very shameful that now you feel guilty, feeling happy for, or whether it literally is just these patterns of suppression where maybe it was a mother that raised you due to the way she was raised by her mom, that you were not allowed to truly be successful or be joyful in your victories because it's almost like, well, don't you remember what grandma went through? Don't you remember what mom went through? So you can't feel happy. So when
Yes.
when I say inherited guilt to you, where do you think it falls in the spectrum?
Honestly, I think I could relate to it even as a child, as an adult. And now I see how it manifests physically as well with with physical pain. So I can relate to it in multiple different ways.
Mm.
I don't know if you can as well, but
Yeah.
I know, yeah, exactly. You feel guilty even just for being happy because how can I be happy when so many generations they're just not happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's one of the biggest ones because I feel that at one point I didn't spend a lot of time with my paternal grandmother because she died very young. But at one point, my grandmother, my mom's mom, very religious, but honestly, it's like to me, she felt like she was like a martyr. Like, like she almost was so identified to the suffering. And granted, she went through a lot of suffering, right? A lot of trauma in her childhood and married, losing my grandpa and all that. But it was almost like it just became normal to feel guilty all the time. And because she went through so many tragic things like the losing of my grandfather and then of my aunt and then my uncles that died very tragically, it's like almost like that was embedded in my family. Like being happy was not okay. Like, how could you be happy with what she went through or with what I went through? And I don't think she ever said it to us like from her mouth, because she was actually like, it's not that she wasn't like nurturing, but she was actually very loving. Like she never mistreated me, like I've talked about before, and things of that nature. But yet she was always very sad and just always very, very processing grief that she never finished doing. So it almost made my mom feel like you shouldn't be happy and you shouldn't uh, really enjoy the beautiful things of life, which was really hard for my dad because my dad was like a very happy person. He came from the opposite childhood where he was the youngest, and even though there was trauma in the family lineage with grandpa and grandma on his side, he was the youngest, so he was almost like chiqueado. You know what I mean? Like he was like the baby, so he got the better end of the stick. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's not expressed. It's not many times it's not I think it's subconsciously, they don't even realize they're doing it, but I think you feel it. You feel it. Why are you so happy? When I'm so miserable, how can you be happy when I'm miserable? You're supposed to be miserable with me, you know? And it keeps going generation to generation. I honestly do. I have seen it in my family. Yes, yes, definitely.
And that's where the crazy part is that then we go into these states of consciousness where we have this unexplained anxiety, we have our own depression. Then what else starts to happen is then we start to self-sabotage, because when we start to get to these levels of happiness, of contentment, success, we're like, oh wait, but my grandma couldn't go after her dreams because of she went through, even if we don't say it out loud or know that we're even thinking it, but it's a program. Well, grandma couldn't live happily because she went through. So I'm going to self-sabotage this relationship. I'm going to self-sabotage this business, this success, this level of money, because it's this, what I feel is at the core of guilt. And we're going to talk about it from a Course in Miracles perspective, because for me, that the course was really the pathway to releasing all these patterns of guilt. But it was like this persistent feeling of unworthiness and shame. And the
Yes.
thing about generational trauma, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but the thing about generational trauma, ironically, is that it gets tucked under the rug. So nobody talks about it. So because no one talks about it, we just keep repressing it. And then the cycle continues of shame, guilt, unworthiness, shame, guilt. What other ways do you see, or maybe even in your life, have you also experienced that guilt has come up like as an adult later?
I feel it's subconsciously. They do it subconsciously, and then we don't even realize that we start doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I know when I was a child, you know, my parents, they started from the bottom, and they just, you know, they we live in an apartment, we moved to this little house, and then we moved to like a bigger house, and my parents stayed together. So I had family who their parents didn't stay together, or they come from, you know, they were separated, divorced. And I don't think they would make these comments maliciously, but they were like, well, look at you. You have your mom and your dad and they're together. And and so we would feel guilty. So we would self-sabotage, and I see this in my sister as well, even as older, with relationship, with my marriage, like how there's like a pattern in my mom's side of the family where a lot of the women end up being alone, divorced, separated, and it's like a pattern that keeps continuing. Like I've seen it in four different generations. Like it's a pattern, and they're everybody's aware of it.
Yes.
And I've come to realize it's not just the women, it's the men as well, except men react to it differently. They remarry faster, or they just don't stay alone. You know, there's some that do, but the majority, they, you know, men react differently than women.
Hmm.
But I do realize that at some point I felt guilty, and I was self-sabotage in my own relationship, because how can I be happy? How can I be doing well when there's all these generations and all these women that I love dearly, and they're not happy? So how am I going to come in here all, you know, and they're not. You feel bad, you feel guilty. There's all these emotions that come up with it. I definitely have seen it and experienced it.
Oh yeah. And I think especially in our culture, I mean, coming from Mexico, being raised here, like you said, it's like not like our parents are saying it out loud, but it's the way they make us feel. Even as an adult, I don't know about you, we always make fun of ourselves, me and my sisters and my brother, because we're like, shit, we still feel guilty for doing stuff. Like, you know, we hide our what we're doing with my mom, so she doesn't know, so she doesn't make us feel guilty, or or just even things like traveling a lot, or thinking of going our own paths in our own ways. Like my sister had to move to another state because of her husband. He's in the Air Force, but it's so trippy that my dad was like almost making her feel guilty unconsciously, even though she couldn't even control it. Like she couldn't control that she was being moved over there. And my dad, because he was in so much pain because of it, like it's like this way that they do it of like, and my dad has done this to me before, especially right now, because he's going through his era where he's retiring right now. So he's going through a lot. And he'll send me like little messages on Instagram about videos about kids who forget their children and all that.
I
And
know
I'm
the
just
videos. I
like,
know the videos.
and I'm
Cuando
just
me muera, don't cry for
yeah.
me. Yeah. I know the videos. I know.
Then I go down the list to my brother and sister. I'm like, did you guys get this shit too? Because why am I getting this right now? Is it because I'm over here and now? So it's almost like I know it's funny to us, but it makes a woman feel like
Oh,
crap.
yes. Oh,
It
yes.
makes it makes you doubt yourself. It makes you feel like you're not honoring your parents, especially in our culture, because I think the biggest thing is like, which is really sad, is like regardless if your mom and dad have severe mental health issues and they're constantly still abusing you, like you still will hear family members say, well, that's your mom. You have to accept her for who she is. Well,
Yes.
that's your dad. You have to basically take what he's doing to you. And I feel like that is the biggest BS
Yes.
because we first are not honoring our own feelings. And then not only that, but then we stay in consciousnesses of guilt. And then we pass that on to our kids. Even if we're like, I don't want to be like my mom, I'm not going to be like my dad. We do the exact same stuff to our children unconsciously because we haven't dealt with guilt. I don't know. Do
Yes.
you agree?
Oh, no. Yes. I've had my mom tell me, even in regards to my marriage,
Yeah.
oh, you think you're all that because you have your husband? And
Yeah.
it's like, how could you say this to your daughter? Or sometimes if we would go on vacation. Oh, I see you went on vacation. Oh, you got a purse. Nice. But it's that little tone.
Yeah.
I do realize she probably doesn't unconsciously. She doesn't realize she's doing it,
Totally.
but it's and then I start feeling bad. I
Hmm.
start feeling guilty. And then you even start feeling guilty even for putting boundaries of, okay, this is unacceptable. Why are you speaking to me this way? You're my mother. You shouldn't be, they're like, why would you be upset? I see my kids, my daughter's in California right now. She's celebrating her birthday. I'm
Oh,
happy for her, it was a surprise. Her friends took her and it was a surprise. She didn't realize it was for her birthday. They thought it was just a bunch of friends going to Magic Mountain. And she was like, Mom, it was a surprise for my birthday. I'm like, that's so awesome. I'm like, I mean, that makes me happy. So we have to break those we have to be consciously aware that we don't repeat them because it's not okay to make our kids feel guilty because they're living their dream life. That's what we all want, you
absolutely.
know?
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important for us to heal this guilt pattern. And we're going to talk about healing it in a moment, but it's so crucial because then we'll also understand that they're not coming from a place of hate or evil, that they're coming from a place of their own pain that they have not dealt with. Like, for example, my dad, like I said, my dad is not usually like that, but right now he's retiring. So he's going through a lot. So he's going through a lot of emotions. My mom actually used to be like that a lot more back then. Very, very, it was obvious she was making us feel guilty and she didn't care. But when I started my healing journey and I healed myself, honestly, it's like now she's the one that does it less. And this last time, I remember an aunt of mine called her because she knew that we were in Costa Rica. And my mom had a conversation with her, and my mom literally said that she told her this. My mom was never like this before. My mom said she told my aunt, you know what? As long as my daughters are happy and they're living their life, then I'm gonna be happy for them. And
Oh,
that made me like, I was like, whoa, who are you, lady? Like, that's not who you are. But that's the whole thing, that your parents are gonna go through their own cycles, their own pain. Some change, some don't. Some, as they get older, their nervous systems get more dysregulated, their brains become less agile. So, of course, they're going to be more in pain. What we have to learn to do is how to heal ourselves so that we can release these guilt patterns so that it doesn't matter what state of consciousness they're in. because they could be in a good mood on Sunday, but on Monday they're in a bad mood. And now they're projecting that out to you so that we can release that. Now, I will say that it is the hardest thing to do. Even as in my 40s now, it's like I still feel like then that's the I know we're not here to save anyone, but like my parents are the ones that are like, can you all just heal? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah, like can we all just get along? Or like that saying. Oh no, definitely. And those it's probably the ones that we want them to heal the most just because they're our parents.
Yes.
But even then, again, I've had to set some serious boundaries because of how serious the how we were talking last week of masculine toxicity. And it just in general, it's just so negative that I can't physically, I couldn't do it anymore. I realized how sick it was making me feel, sickly, my nervous system, just physical pain in my body that I'm getting therapy. I think I remember telling you that nurse that I'm consulting with, that she's practicing Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yes.
We just had a session where I have this pain in my shoulder and my arm, and she's discussing this in regards to, okay, where's this coming from, and
Mhm.
how to release that guilt of why I have these boundaries, or why, I have to release and let this go of this guilt because it's either my health or, or continuing this toxic pattern that doesn't serve anybody, including our children and our grandkids and whoever comes after us. It needs to stop.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that because I think where we get the most guilt is when we set these boundaries. I swear to
Oh,
you.
definitely.
It's
Definitely.
not just like, oh, I need to set boundaries. I set them and then the guilt kicks in like a mofo. Like you're just
Oh,
like, oh, especially when it comes to your parents. So I think it's so important that you bring that up because it is not acceptable for you to be around a big sign, and we've talked a lot about this of growth and healing, is that you're actually setting boundaries. A lot of people don't set boundaries, and that is a sign of weakness. That's a sign of you allowing yourself to be used as a rug mat. That's a sign of you letting your guilt basically control your life because it is not okay. I don't care what culture you come from. I don't care who your parents are. If your parents are in an unstable mental health situation, it is so important for you to set those boundaries to take care of yourself first. That is key, number one.
oh,
And
definitely.
why do you think, in your experience, because I know exactly how that feels too, do you feel that we feel even more guilt after we set the boundaries?
Oh, definitely. I didn't have a choice. I was very physically sick that I don't think anybody realizes how sick I was, that I had to. I had no choice. I had to put this boundary. And it came to the point where I went through a phase where I completely isolated myself from everybody, even my friends. I needed my time by myself because I was just going through so much physically and emotionally, spiritually. That's when we talk about in the Sovereign Woman Academy, the dark nights of the soul. It was just so intense of, I think I was purging actually. You're just, everything's just coming out, all these emotions, all this pain. And I didn't want to be around anybody. I wanted to process what was happening emotionally, physically, everything, to be able to continue the healing journey. Because it's, if you don't have those boundaries to take that time for yourself to heal,
Mhm.
it's very hard, especially when you're around somebody who doesn't want to do the work or doesn't want to acknowledge or see anything. It becomes extremely difficult, and once your health starts going down, it's very hard to get back to a
Yes.
stable level. And I think people don't understand that.
Yeah. I think they
They don't
don't.
go through it, they don't understand. That's the thing.
And that's why it's such a blessing that that nurse that you found, that found you, probably God, right? That she studies Gabor Mate, because to our listeners who don't know who Dr. Mate is, he's basically a trauma-informed doctor who's been doing the holy work of bringing the connection into the light of the truth of that our childhood is what creates the adults and creates our anxieties, depressions, addictions, and all these different things. as adult, that childhood, and what we all went through as children, our parents went through it too, because they're just recreating that. And that's the whole thing that people don't understand. Oh, I have guilt. Okay, whatever. But you don't understand that staying in long periods of guilt is what causes what you're sharing, which is physical disease. Because
Yeah.
the first, all physical disease starts with the repressed emotion. It's not just you're gonna have an emotion, oh my God, I'm gonna get sick right away, right? It's the consistent staying in that feeling. And guilt, again, it's almost like, especially for women, it's almost like you're a hero if you feel guilty. Like it's a good thing. And then society too, oh my God, it's the easiest way to control you. It's like think about like society, the way they were doing it with the pandemic. It's like, if you get the vaccine, if you don't get the vaccine, you're gonna kill older people, or you're irresponsible, or if you don't vote for this person, or if you don't wear this, if you don't post this supporting Black Lives Matter, like it's all, or kids now, if you don't accept this person because they're gay or because they're this and that, it's a constant like making you feel guilty. And then people don't realize, it's like you said, why would I wait till I hit the rock bottom, dark night of the soul, which is like literally a physical disease, or something else more serious, not realizing that these emotions are actually creating this within us. Isn't that like, for us it's obvious, but do you think it's obvious for other women out there that like emotions literally create physical disease?
Well, many, unfortunately, many don't see how that's happening. Thank God there's many of us realizing this now, because it's not just family. Well, how can you set this boundary with this person? Well, I need it. I needed it. Nobody knows except for me, because I'm the one that's lived it all my life. But even in our religion, even in they make us feel so, everything is guilt. Even the prayer, por mi culpa, por mi gran, and it's like, geez, like it's my fault. Like I'm guilty of. When you baptize a child, yes, I baptize a child, but it's like the purpose of it is, let's baptize this child to relieve them from all sin or whatever.
Right.
It's a child. What do you mean sin of what? Like it's a baby. Why are we saying this? Let's baptize him just because we want him to be blessed by God or whatever. But don't say to relieve him from all his guilt when this is a child that's barely born. Like, what do you mean? What could they have possibly done?
Mm.
Feel all this guilt.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even I think about that at all. About, you're right, with the baptism, it's like, how could a child be already a sinner and have guilty?
They say that let's baptize to release them from all this guilt. Well, it's a child. It's a baby. What could they have possibly done?
A
Be
thousand.
born? Cry because they're hungry?
Right? Like, oh my, it's like, yeah, it's that. And I'm so glad that you brought up the religious programming, because it's so true. And we'll talk about A Course in Miracles now, and the perspective of guilt, because I feel like I have the deepest, closest connection that I've ever had with our brother Jesus Christ now in my life than I ever did growing up as Catholic, right? And one thing that I never understood was what you just shared, the por mi culpa, because of my fault, because of my fault. Like, even as a little girl, I was like, damn, I'm a bad mama jama, like, what in the world? And it never resonated with me. Like, it was just, I always ask questions. I would always ask my mom.
It's a program that we've been taught since we were children. Like, like, what did we do? That's so horrible.
That is so true. And it wasn't until like A Course in Miracles came into my life that I started to understand the teachings of Jesus Christ from a perspective of the Christ consciousness, which is truly that sin is not real, which the Pope actually sent out like a message about that, like in the 1970s. Like, they're doing a lot of different things that are changing the way we see the Bible and the teachings. Even in Mary Magdalene, the Pope in the 1960s also had to say that she was never a prostitute, because she was never a prostitute. And the Bible is the way you perceive it, and unfortunately it was a lot of the times perceived by the patriarchy, by males, and unfortunately the teachings were corrupted to kind of like be used to control and to keep you in this basically guilty state of consciousness, because if you feel guilty about killing your brother Jesus Christ, then you will never step in your power. And that's truly what happens when you feel guilty because you're born with sin, then you will never fully feel that you deserve God's love, God's protection. And then this gets perpetuated through all of these different patterns in our lineage. Now, the thing about A Course in Miracles that helped me so much in understanding guilt is that, look, all of us make mistakes. We make mistakes. My parents make mistakes. The murderer makes a mistake. But anyone who is willing to bring that light or that darkness to the light has the God will forgive everything and everyone. And I think when people hear that, they think, oh, now you're making narcissists. Now you're creating people. Well, let me just do it. If anyways, God is going to forgive me. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, and I don't know how you see guilt now based on A Course in Miracles, because you've been a student too, but the way I see it is that we act out of our level of consciousness, right? We act out of our upbringing, out of our pain, out of our generational trauma. So we also have the path and right to change our consciousness. And if someone is able to change their consciousness and repent and bring these things to light, then God will forgive it all. And that's why they say that saints, they were once the biggest criminals. They were once the biggest, people that were going against what the norm was. What made them into saints is their ability to recognize their mistakes and to stop repeating them. That's the whole thing.
Yes, to stop
That's exactly. Yeah, you can't, not what we're doing right now in the world. I think the world shows us this fake Christianity. And it's not everyone's a fake Christian, but if you look at like the mega churches or you look at the representation of Christianity, it's almost like I just go to church to wash off the sins that I did, and then I go back into the real world, and then I go back and commit them again. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that a lot of the times we feel so guilty because we feel that God will not forgive us for the things we've done. And the problem with guilt is that it corrodes the relationship we have with God and the perception we have of God, which then puts us in these loops of projecting our guilt out onto others and making others worse than us so that God then doesn't have to look at us. Does that make sense? Or how do you
Oh,
see it?
yes, definitely. I want to clear up in regards to Christianity because sometimes people think Christianity is just Christians or no. I mean, because there's the Catholics, we're Christians as well, and a lot of times Christians will be like, well, we're Christians, and they believe we're attacking them. No, it's in general. There's many different religions that are considered Christians. But I have seen in regards to like in the Catholic Church, oh well, I'll go confess and I'll do it again. No, 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 no. You have to become aware of what you're doing and not continue, like you said, continue doing um the sins and become aware and make those changes necessary. Because I see it all the time. I see it with a lot of people that have that, oh well, God said it was fine and I'll just go confess and then everything will be fine. No, I don't think it works that way. Recently God showed me that we do have to earn it. We do have to, I feel like we feel entitled. Like we're in a society, we feel entitled, like we're God's children, we should be forgiven for whatever we do. And he was like, no, you have to earn it. You have to really put in the effort. We're not angels. We're going to make mistakes. We're human beings, but we do have to at least try and learn and study like the Bible, the Course in Miracles. Everybody, I tell everybody, I haven't seen anything in the Course in Miracles that makes me think, this is odd. I don't think God, everything I've seen so far, it's we have to forgive. Nothing has gone wrong. God has a plan. We have to trust him. Everything has been perfect. It all has served the purpose, you know?
1,000%. And that's our purpose here. I mean, the process of ascension, of spiritual awakening, which is what all of us are going through here, we is revealing these uncomfortable emotions and bringing them to the light, and that is ascension. And the only way to reach ascension, atonement, which is what the course calls it, is to live in unconditional love. And we can't live in unconditional love like our brother Jesus Christ if we're not honest and we don't acknowledge the guilt, the fears, the all those other emotions. It's not that they're bad, like the envy or the jealousy, or it's not that they're bad. We're all humans. It's, are you considering, are you staying in that emotion? Are you gonna now identify your life with that emotion? That's the whole thing. That's why we need healing of the mind. And that's why the course for me has become like the spiritual psychotherapy that brings healing to the level of the mind at the root cause. My perceptions of why I would even feel guilty, or why, the awareness around what is moving through. And the whole thing about the course, and especially when it comes to like identities, it's the ego. So I was kind of talking about the ego yesterday, because a lot of people, when they hear the ego, they think like it's just this arrogant part of ourselves, but it's not. It's this part of ourselves that creates identities to keep ourselves safe. And sometimes it's identities of I'm broken, I'm unworthy. When it comes to guilt, it's crazy, because the ego doesn't know who you truly are, or doesn't want you to know who you truly are. And it literally thinks feeling guilty is humility. It literally is like, it motivates us to feel guilty in order to obey God's laws. And that's the whole thing that's insane to me. And without this work, I wouldn't have even recognized it, is that it was a constant, I felt guilty for everything. I felt guilty since I was a young girl, as an
Yes.
adult, always, for everything. I was guilty as a mother, guilty as a wife, guilty as a daughter. It was never enough. And the whole thing was because I had an identity, unhealed mind that said, you're separate from God. God is a punishing God that you should be very afraid of. And by the way, this is all the reasons why God doesn't love you. And that I didn't even become aware of until I started doing this work of truly understanding the teachings of our brother Jesus Christ, and understanding that if I could forgive my Judases, my people that have hurt me, that I could also forgive myself, and that I could finally release this guilt.
Yes, I had somebody tell me ego stands for easing God out. Like, wow, it never dawned on me, easing God out. But I have noticed how ever since I started this journey and this healing journey, I had to become aware of how I was responding to certain situations, and recognizing and apologizing sometimes for my reactions, or whatever I was doing. And it brought even so much more healing even into my relationships, into my marriage, with my children, with my sister, because you're becoming aware of, okay, this is how I was, this is how I was responding, how I was reacting. It was wrong. I'm working on it. I'm trying to do better. I apologize if I ever offended you, or if I did this, I shouldn't have responded that way. And it just, people always become, no, this is how I am, the ego, this is how I am, deal with it. God has forgiven me. That's awesome if you feel God has forgiven you, but you're still hurting all these people around you. So how is God really going to respond to this if you're not even listening to your children, what they're trying to say? I started watching, me and my husband, Julio Cesar Chavez, and it's been out for a while, but we didn't even finish the first episode. Oh my God, it was so painful to watch. Just his pain of what he went through with his drug addictions, and how his two older sons are, and they're struggling with their addictions as well. And then the son tries to come and speak to him and tell him, speak to him about stuff that Julio Cesar Chavez did when they were kids. And Julio just completely shut him down, his son. He said, we're not talking about me, we're talking about you. And I told my husband, that's the problem right there. His son just wants to be heard. He just wants to speak. Se quiere desahogar. He just wants to, like, his dad to hear him out of how he felt when his dad was going through his own stuff. And we're all human beings. We all make mistakes. And yes, he's doing better. Yes, he has his organization where, you know, they handle people with addictions and all that stuff. That's awesome. But you still have to be able to talk about it and acknowledge and accept and hear your children out to what even me sometimes my kids tell me, well, when you did this, it really hurt me. I'm so sorry. It wasn't my intention, you know, becoming that awareness of just making them feel guilty for making me feel it just making me feel guilty and just goes
Right.
in circles. You know, everybody's making everybody feel guilty and nobody's dealing with the situation of what's actually happening
Right.
or how everybody's responding.
Yeah, but you just gave such a beautiful example of how life should be dealt with Julio Cesar Chavez, and I haven't watched the documentary. I'm gonna. I heard.
I couldn't even finish the first episode and it was so heavy.
I did see a clip of him when it was gonna come out. I guess it was like they were promoting it, and he still talks very like he has very like slow talk, huh? Because of the drugs or something like that. Like I feel like he just deteriorated.
Well, I don't know. I saw him, he was fine,
Uh-huh.
but I'll pay more attention to that just to see.
Okay. Maybe it was something that I saw maybe a long time ago, but that's a perfect example of what you're saying right now. Look at him. He went through the addiction. So what does he do? Instead of healing himself so that his children can heal, let me just open a center and help other people. Like focus on you. We do this all the time where people that have gone through trauma and then, oh, I'm gonna go open a center. But my kids, let them figure it out. Or my own healing. In fact, some of the people that are healers or that help the most is because of the guilt that they carry inside of them so much. People, the most religious people that I know have severe guilt from big family secrets that they're holding in. That's why they're so damn religious. And I'm not trying to say anything about negative about religion or anything, because like I said, me and my brother Jesus Christ are BFFs, you know, Our Lady of Guadalupe. There's a reason she's on my arm. We are BFFs. I read the Bible. I read A Course in Miracles. Nothing. I'm talking about the dogmatic way and the programming that it's okay for you to come listen to the word of Christ here, but then don't go act like it out there. Don't go literally walk the talk. And I hear this so often. Oh, I can't forgive because I'm not Christ. Who I'm not. Maybe God will forgive them one day. Well, okay, but that's fine because I know you've been hurt and everybody and your feelings are valid, but not doing that work of forgiveness is literally what's continuing the pattern and the cycle of
And the
trauma.
guilt's still there. The guilt's still there. You know, I still struggle with to a certain extent. I'm better at it. But deep down, even for having certain boundaries that I had to have for my own mental, spiritual, physical health, I still to a certain extent feel guilty
Mm.
that I'm still working on. But at the same time, I'm like, no, this is my children still need me. They're still young. They're still going. And why don't I have the right to live a peaceful life and be able to live a longer life because I'm taking care of my own health? You know, so it's a struggle that I do still go through of that guilt of I have these boundaries with these certain people that I don't allow myself to be around them for my own mental and physical health. Because it's actually both with me. It does affect me. Even when I'm around certain people, I'll feel it. I'll feel it in my face, I feel it in my head, I feel it in my shoulder. And then if I keep staying there, oh, it gets really, really bad.
Mhm. Absolutely. Because your body's wise and your body's trying to communicate with you. But the thing that I was also going to say about that is the way just I can tell so obviously how much that pattern has been broken between you and your children. And the reason is because of what you said. You said, when I make a mistake, they come to me and they tell me, here's what happened. And then I tell them, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware. We we can't even go to our parents because it's like you go and you tell them and they're like, no, you're the wrong one, or we wouldn't even as children even think about talking up about how we felt because we would just be told to shut down, to like we were talking about toxic masculinity. You don't need to be crying, you need to be angry, be quiet. So that's what I mean. It's not that we're never gonna we don't do this healing work because we have to be perfect angels that never make a mistake, or anything like that. No, and I heard this about relationships too. The relationships, the way you teach your children how to be in a good relationship, romantic relationship, is not that you never have any fights. It's how do you resolve conflict? Because there's going to be conflict. There's going to be people that are hungry. There's going to be people that are going through retirement. There's going to be people that are going through an illness. There's going to be people that are going through a transition of their family member. It's not about avoiding, it's not that now that I've released all this guilt, now I avoid anything that makes me feel good. No, it's just I'm very sensitive about it. And guess what? I don't suppress my emotions. I talk about them. And when someone confronts me about me making a mistake, I don't go ahead and take it personal right away. We talk about it. If it's not my gift, if they're wrong, I don't take it personal. I'm just like, you're wrong, but okay. But if it's mine, oh shit, thank you so much. You know what? I do need to change that about me. Don't you think?
Oh, yes, and many times we're not even aware.
Exactly.
We're so used to that program or the hearing the little tone, and then we start copying that little tone, and we don't realize we're saying it, we're using it. Honestly, I think the telenovelas don't help. They don't help. It's so much drama. It's insane. It's just any little thing that happens, and then you hear the. I always remember the slaps. You know, there was one time me and my husband were watching. We like when my oldest daughter was little, she was a baby. We would like get together and we watch novelas. And then there was this one time, this woman just it was a slap and it was loud. And my husband looked at me, he's like, "Did you see that?" And I'm like, I know. Like we were like, wow. But they're very, I think that doesn't help either where what we watch, what we listen to, it's we're already programmed, we're coming with this program and then we're watching all these things or we're listening. That doesn't help at all. No.
No. And now it's on steroids too, because it's not just the telenovelas, now it's social media. They got TikTok, they got Facebook, and these platforms they know what your biggest pain points are. So they're gonna show you what's gonna give you adrenaline and cortisol kicks, stress, so that you keep coming back. So now, like this program of whatever would cause them to feel guilty is being over shown to them in every single way, and now they're bringing it home. I mean, how many times it's like almost like I guess there's a diagnosis for this now where people like, because we're all connected, and now you can see like all these different illnesses that people have, and then a lot of the times people are like, she has that illness, I have that illness now too, because before we didn't know. Like your aunt or cousin, like we live in Arizona, I have family in California, I never knew anything about them before social media. Now I know everything that's happening all day and night. And that is it. Or other things like if you have patterns of, let's say, of infidelity. We're going to talk about that one of the episodes. Why is it all of a sudden all of your feed is people that are cheating or like, stuff like that? That's because that's your biggest pain point. That's going to cause you to get into those low vibrations, and then you're going to feel like shit watching that all day. And then you're going to go take it out on your husband. You're going to go take it out on your family. Like, I don't think people realize the level of programming that's around us.
Yes, definitely.
But the telenovelas, for sure. Those were like literally like the most toxic thing you could ever watch. Okay, so let's talk about energetically now. So we looked at the spiritual aspects of, this word of guilt and what the course tells us about guilt, that we make mistakes. It's about changing our consciousness, but also energetically, because a lot of the times there's a lot of there's things that are associated almost to even karma. And I guess this one would be more, I want to talk about this one because it's more of a situation where maybe you've had a family member who actually did like something really tragic in the past. Like maybe they were in a crime or something that was really, really shocking and that was hidden down in the lineage and nobody wants to talk about it, right? One of the things that I've learned about the energetics is, and we talk a lot about it as it relates to karma, but I don't want people to think of karma as good or bad, because it isn't. Karma is you you do something of love, that's what you're going to get back. You do something of hate, that's what you're going to get back. So it's not that we're like being punished. It literally is just like, this is a perfect universe, and 2 + 2 is going to equal 4. So the idea of unresolved issues from past lives, from ancestral actions, they feel like a curse because they feel like they create this karmic burden that now we have to carry as well. And then there's a lot of evidence, of course, through epigenetics, which prove that at the cellular level, these traumatic experiences and emotions are stored, and then they're passed down genetically, from generation to generation. So thinking about this, if it's nothing that we've done in our lifetime to feel guilty, and we can't really be aware, or we don't really know what mom feels guilty, how do you see this pattern being passed down as it relates to like way past generations? What could we do about it now with this blocked energy, even if we don't know what our ancestors went through?
You know, I have a, let me see if this falls into it. I was seeing a psychologist for a while,
Mhm.
and I had told her about how there's certain patterns that I was familiar with. I'm assuming there's other patterns that I'm not aware of, but there was a saying that I think can there was like a little prayer or something like that that she gave me in regards to releasing ancestral patterns, because there is, I remember when I was talking to the nurse the last week or this Monday, I don't remember, we were talking about this pain that I get in my shoulder, and she was asking me, did your mother go through something? Was it something in your childhood? And it could be my grandmother. I did realize how, you know, past generations, like our grandmothers, they, you say your grandmother, she was more spoken,
Mhm.
but I know my grandmother, my abuelita, I remember a story of her telling me where something my grandfather did, and it was obviously, I didn't realize it until just recently, that they never spoke about it. She never confronted him. He never told her what he had done, but she knew.
Mm.
She wouldn't say anything. She would just stay quiet. And then my mom was more outspoken, but she took it to a level where,
Mm.
you know, toxic masculinity, where you take it too far to the right or left, whatever you want to call it. And it just becomes, we have to find that middle ground. It becomes too far right, too far left, and just that middle ground. But this prayer that the psychologist told me, I don't know if it's okay if I could read it. I
Of course.
translated it. It says, to all the women in my lineage who had to deprive themselves from being successful in all healthy and prosperous relationships, from having a good partner in life, for loyalty to you, I've been repeating the same patterns, or similar to yours. I recognize your pain. I recognize your pain. I feel for you, but that was your destiny and not mine. As of today, I give myself permission to be successful with abundance and prosperity, focused on my job, with good kids, with loving, healthy, and harmonious relationships in their lives, because that will be my way of honoring you in this life, in love and prosperity, so that your sacrifice won't be in vain. And I think it was so beautiful because we could apply it to things we don't even know. Because I'm sure there's stuff that we don't know that happened to our grandmothers, our grandfathers, that we don't know what they were carrying. We don't know everything that they went through. We have no idea. But it's obvious there's certain patterns that keep repeating themselves for sure. That you see it generation after generation.
Yeah. Oh my God, that was such a beautiful prayer. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's exactly what I meant, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it's not necessary to know exactly what your ancestors went through in order to heal, or what your mom went through, or your grandma, to understand yourself. I mean, like you just did that beautiful prayer. That beautiful prayer, those are words. Words are frequencies that then absolutely release and have an impact, not only on now, past, and future generations. And ultimately, we don't need to know what our ancestors truly went through, because we are living it. We it's our characteristics, it's our personality. Your DNA is the emotions of your ancestors, both the triumphs and but also the tragedy. So it's not absolutely, that's why the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I think a lot of people can try to spend thousands of years on in therapy trying to figure themselves out. And it's awesome that you're able to pinpoint, you know, what family member it came from. And believe me, even through the spiritual work that I've done, I've been able to go to ancestors that are not even here anymore, that were 3 generations behind, and figured it out. But that necessarily wasn't the liberation or the part that liberated me or that healed me, because the other part was energetic. Because when I started to practice Kundalini yoga meditation, and this is what my teacher told me, and I will always remember this, is, and she's a Western doctor too. So she's a physician, but she's also a Kundalini yoga therapist. And she's like, look, you could spend a lot of years trying to figure yourself out in therapy and trying to figure out why you feel guilty, why all this, or you can simply practice the yoga, the Kundalini yoga, and let these memories, if they're traumatic, to fall off of the body because the body keeps score, but also to be rewritten. Because the whole thing with Kundalini yoga meditation is that first, these impressions, these things that they went through, they become energetic imprints. These unresolved emotions, these traumas, they literally become our DNA, and they're stored specifically in different aspects of our physical body, but generally in what is known as our subtle body. Our subtle body is, we're 10 bodies. Then the subtle body comes in with the soul when we incarnate. And the subtle body carries all the samskaras, all of the experiences of your past life. And then this equates to, you know, impacting the chakra centers, which each of the chakra centers processes emotions and helps us deal with life, right? So it's an energetic imprint that is driven from the subconscious mind, the programming, these deep-seated beliefs that is connected to the cellular memories. These traumatic experiences are stored at the cellular level, and yes, equated to karmic debt. However, you're not cursed because it's energy. So if it's manifesting as stagnant, disrupted energy that then creates a disease, then all you have to do is introduce new energy, introduce sound, introduce breath. This is a key component of Kundalini yoga. It's the breath work that changes the nervous system wiring of guilt, that changes the brain's ability to process information, to shift perceptions, right? It's the breath that changes those patterns. It's the kriyas that we do, the meditations, the way we put our hands, the chanting. Oh my gosh, the chanting, because when you introduce a new sound, it's like you're on a hamster wheel that's going really, really fast, and all of a sudden you're throwing something in the hamster wheel to stop it, to stop that pattern, introducing a new sound so that you can then basically allow these traumatic experiences to fall off. That has been my experience also. It was the combination of the spiritual psychotherapy to deal with the guilt, but then at the same token, doing these somatic practices. Somatic meaning, how am I going to change the body frequency, the mind, and the spirit in order for me to actually release this guilt? What has been your experience through, like, perhaps energy work or somatic healing, or do you believe it's part of the equation?
Oh, it's part of the equation. I know when we've done certain classes,
Mhm.
and I have to get back at it because I've been dropping the ball for the last couple of months. But I know in our group, our women group, there's been certain classes that we've done that immediately we'll finish and we'll be texting each other. Did you feel that? I'm like, yeah, I felt it. What? That was amazing. And it's just, you just feel this, I don't know, like sometimes you just feel like you release something, something just heavy fell off of you. You can't you can't explain it. Sometimes it just happens. But I do see the difference since I started. I know in religion a lot of times they don't believe in this. They say it's taboo, you're not supposed to be doing it. Um, I'm having serious questions about it because I haven't had any bad experiences. Everything
Right.
has been good. If anything, like I said one time, when I'm supposed, my based on my date of birth, I'm supposed to do the negative and the positive mind without knowing years before I knew that. When I did those meditations, my soul felt so happy. I literally felt like Tinkerbell when she was rolling up in the air and she's twisting up in the air and she's happy. That's literally how my soul felt. I can't explain that. How can I explain that? And my connection to God now with the Course in Miracles, with everything all wrapped up in one, it's so much like his voice is so clear. And we have to be careful because some people tell me, well, God said it was okay for me to do this. I'm like, I don't think God says it's okay for you to cheat on your husband. Like, no,
Yeah.
no, I don't think God would say that's okay. You know,
Mhm.
who are you listening to? You know,
Mhm.
but in overall, I do feel just like, there's a podcast that we're gonna do where, of course, in Miracles, I'm listening to it and it says, if you're not gonna tell your story, then what's the point?
Yeah.
How are you supposed to help anybody if you're not telling your story? And then something else happened again, tell your story. And then I go to get something done and I'm sitting there and there's a sticker on the wall that says, share your story. And I'm like, how many more signs do I want from God? It all works together. To me, it's all one. It all
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, and I'm even seeing that in marketing. I heard this guy, you know how back in the day and even in real estate, you know that they do this in all the industries. They say niche down, only talk about one thing, you know? And honestly, there's this I saw this happening a couple of years ago, but now it's pretty obvious that it's not about niching down. It's you being authentically you and just telling your freaking story. That's it. Because the true teacher of the age of Aquarius is one who has experienced something and is now sharing that with you. Because so many of us can just pick up knowledge. We can read a book, we can go to artificial intelligence and do all this, but did you really go through it? And are you really being honest about what you're sharing? That's what gravitates people. People basically trust you because they're like, it's not how many years you've done it, it's did you do it and did you transcend it, right? And you can tell when somebody has done something versus they just read it off of a YouTube channel or watched a YouTube video, right? So yeah, that part I think is crucial in understanding. I also think it's so important that you did bring up the fears around the yoga and the meditation, especially for people who are religious. And it happened to me too. You know, when I first started practicing, I grew up Catholic. My mom was like very afraid, and she would tell me, "What are you doing?" And she would actually be very, very afraid of my aunts and uncles talking bad about me and now you're a witch or what do you do? Like I do tarot reading a lot. And every time I post it, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm scaring a few family members there or whatever. But it's so weird because the opposite happened. I was in my truth. I wasn't trying to convince people. I was just sharing my experiences where it got to the point where I know my mom felt uncomfortable with me sharing this stuff because she wouldn't say it, but how she would act, right? And then one day, one of my aunts, actually it was an aunt with my uncle, called her and told her, oh my God, we've seen the transformation that Veronica has gone through. What an amazing transformation. And we want to learn more about meditation and yoga. And like my mom was blindsided because she thought that they were talking bad about me. And even to the point, you know, I shared this story with you that my mom was ill for a period and she even started to do meditation because it really was helping her nervous system. Right now, I'm trying to get her back into it, but she's resisting it a lot. But again, I'm not there to push her, and it's not because of religion. I just think that a lot of the times when we're getting ready to break these cycles, the ego really fights us.
Oh, yeah.
And then we come up with all of these different excuses, you know. So I'm glad that you also brought that up because I think a lot of us that get on this healing journey and we've never done meditation, we've never done yoga, we've never studied A Course in Miracles, we feel guilty because, well, I heard, and it's crazy because once you start doing this, of course, you're going to get videos that say yoga is evil, yoga is this, yoga is that. And, you know, just as much as I could spend hours on showing you in the Bible how Jesus Christ talked about yoga and meditation, I don't need to defend that in myself anymore. I will just allow, like what you just said, my authentic expression be that example. It's the way I live my life. I don't need to be preaching. I don't need to be telling people what they need to do. That will be, and if somebody comes at me or tries to say something, then it's their own pain and fear. It has nothing to do with who I am. So I'm very happy that you mentioned that, because I think that that is another guilt cycle that we stick in. Don't you think?
Oh yes. And I honestly, the meditation, it just calms you down. And you have to sit there with your emotions, even just sitting there with your emotions.
Yeah.
The nurse from Dr. Gabor Mate. I'm telling her, okay, this pain, what feelings are coming up with this pain? Let's sit with it. Let's just sit with that emotion right now. Let's just sit with the pain.
Yep.
Because a lot of times we're like, "Ah, my arm hurts and I'm just gonna keep going." Let's sit with it. I want to cry, but I need to go do something else because I don't want to cry. And then we're just suppressing everything, and then it just makes it worse. Just sitting there, feeling. We're human beings. We're meant to feel.
Yeah, but it's because of the guilt. We feel guilty. Oh no, everyone told me I gotta go talk to a doctor. The doctor hasn't worked. Okay, so if there's other holistic approaches, healthy, natural ways of healing, I feel guilty about doing it because that's not the way I was raised. That's not what I was told. But like I've said, I in my life, especially even based on my astrology chart, it's always been like I have to be a pioneer. I've always been a pioneer of something. And this right now, what I'm seeing, like today, this morning, I literally just saw a real estate broker. She's huge, huge in another state. Guess what she's taking training on? And this thing I think is not right, because this is like Tony Robbins too. But she's doing breathing, she's becoming a breathing coach. And she's a top real estate broker who has a a big huge team, and then also does conferences and women's communities. Now she's learning these techniques to teach them to her team and to teach them as a whole. What I don't like is when they do the stuff like Tony Robbins. So Tony Robbins and other people, they go and they will learn from these ancient techniques, these breathing techniques, these methods. Guess where they're coming from? They're coming from Kundalini yoga. They're coming from these ancient teachings, and then they just cover it up and they're like, oh, they're not chakras, they're energy centers, so that people don't get triggered. That is so not right. Especially if you're going to go take teaching from breathing as a breathing coach, find out where these origins came from. Because if that person is hiding where these teachings came from, that person is not honoring the golden circle or in the golden chain. And those teachings will never be as empowered and as powerful as they should be. You need to be honest of where they're coming from. I knew about all these other breathing techniques. Actually, I had tried a lot of different yogas since 2008. It wasn't until Kundalini yoga, which to me is not, to me, it's the science of energy. It's a technology. That is what it means to me. Religions were made from it. It's not a religion. It has nothing to do with that. And now we're seeing all these different things that are showing up. So I don't judge these people. I think a lot of them don't know. And those that do know, be careful, because not being honest about where these teachings come from just so that you can get Jane to come do them because she doesn't want to be triggered by her religious upbringing can also be very dangerous. I just
Oh,
want to bring that up.
yes.
I don't know.
Another podcast. I have a really big story in regards to that one. That's another podcast.
Are you serious? Oh my God, yes. That's what happens. We do these podcasts and then more ideas come up. We're like, oh, we got more to talk about. But don't you agree in general that we are seeing these teachings of meditation and breathing and yoga? And you could disagree totally, but I think it's becoming more common. More people are feeling less guilty about it.
Yes, it is coming more around. And at the same time, I am seeing more resistance as well
Yes.
because people don't understand it. But personally, like I said, my experience it's all been good.
Yeah.
If anything, even my kids tell me, they're like, Suzette, she's like, wow, mommy, I see how committed you are. And that's amazing. And I do see the changes. I do see you're more calm, just everything in general. So So what is so bad about that? People, the religion or whatever, you're not supposed to do yoga. Why? It doesn't make, to me, it just doesn't make sense because that's not, my experience has not been negative at all.
Yeah, and that whole goes back to guilt and stepping outside of our cultural norms, you know. Our culture has never practiced yoga. We don't see a lot of women of color that are sharing these technologies. We see a lot of American women that are sharing these technologies. So when American women practices them, it gives permission to all the other American women to do it. But if we don't see a woman of color doing it, well, I don't have permission. So it's okay. We'll be pioneers. We can help people. It's kind of become normal. But the whole thing, ladies, is don't allow guilt to stop you from healing yourself, especially if, I mean, the future of healing is sound. That's just the bottom line. So as these new opportunities become available to you for healing, check in with your guilt because a big part of that will stop you from actually healing. I mean, I literally had this call with this woman who, my goodness, like she felt guilty for releasing her identity to the abuse between her and her mom. Like, she's like, her mom had died already, and she literally felt guilty for healing. Like, she said that out loud to me. She's like, I cannot heal because if I heal, that's not fair to my mom who never healed. And when she said that, I was like, well, I'm not even going to say nothing. I stayed quiet and I let her hear herself say that. And then she said it again. And then she's like, but wait a second. Wouldn't my mom want me to heal? And I was like, I don't know. You answer that question.
What is the best way to honor her mother by healing, or her grandmother and all, I want to cry, all her other lineage that came before her that felt all this pain?
So
What better way to honor them than to heal and not let it continue with our children and our grandkids?
1,000%. But sometimes we're so in this pain, and I've been there, where we're in so much deep pain that our guilt makes us believe that it's safer to stay this way.
Yeah, it's
And
insane.
it's insane, isn't it? I get chills. I literally get chills, and I get chills because I've been there. I've been there. I didn't know that healing was an option for me. I thought that feeling guilty was the norm, that that's just the way I was supposed to operate in this world.
Yes, the
So
same.
absolutely. Absolutely. So we talked about the spirituality behind the guilt. We talked about the energetics behind the guilt. I don't know, how do we close this? Like, what would you say as it relates to guilt for a woman who might be struggling with these same things that we've been talking about? Like, how do they even begin the journey?
I think what I just said, the best way to honor our lineage is by healing, not letting it continue with our children, our grandkids, or whoever, everybody that comes after us, making sure this is where it stops. Like I've told you before, it stops with me. It does not continue with my children. It does not. It has to stop somewhere, and it's going to be me. I already chose myself.
That's why I always loved you. Because it was always like everything you said resonated because that's the attitude that I took as well. It's just like it stops with me.
Yes.
As difficult as it hasn't been easy, and that's why we're being as real and raw as possible with everyone because I don't like it when people say it's all love and light. It's not.
Oh, it has not been love and light. No, no, no. It's a lot of crying, dark nights of the soul. So many nights, and my husband works nights, so many nights that I was by myself, just crying. I literally, I feel I was purging, just purging all these emotions, and probably not even all mine.
Absolutely.
Not even all mine. Just like my grandmother, she stood quiet for so many years, and I see now so many generations. Like I have a couple cousins who have had tumors in their like thyroid. I believe it's the thyroid, and I honestly believe it's from suppressing and for not speaking. Because my grandmother, there were so many things she did not even spoke up about. She just took it and she suppressed everything. She probably expressed it negatively with her kids, but it was in the right way of really releasing it. And it just keeps passing down. And like we said last time, finding your group, just searching. There's so many of us now that we are on this journey to heal. And what better way than to heal ourselves? The best way to honor them, everybody, the ones that came before us and the ones that are coming after us, is to heal. That's the best way we could show them. Even if we have our own boundaries with certain people in our family,
Yes.
we still love them, but we need to heal. That's the best gift we could give to everybody in our lineage.
So,
It's a way of showing love, you know?
so powerful, sister. That's it. That's a perfect way to summarize. I would not have anything to add on to that because that is true. That is the honest, raw truth. And that is also the potential that we all have. All of us. It doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter how much guilt you're carrying. You all have this potential because everything is healable. We have the spiritual approach and the energetic approach that's going to take you there. And whatever path you end up following, whether it's through meditation, Kundalini Yoga, Course in Miracles, through your own pathway, trust it, but know that it is healable. So
Yes.
thank you. My goodness, this has been amazing. I mean, we've talked about the energetics of healing guilt. We talked about the spiritual aspect of guilt and how we can release that. And both approaches, I think that it does remind us that we're not bound by the past, that we can all break free from this inherited guilt and embrace our true self. So we invite you to continue this journey with us. Right now, the Sovereign Sisterhood Academy is closed for enrollment, but you can always join us in our free private Facebook group community, the Sovereign Sisterhood Movement. You can search it in the Facebook groups, or you can find the link below here in the description. In this group, you'll connect with other women as well, share experiences and support each other. You also get access to my weekly live healing session there. And this week, we're going to be talking about releasing inherited generational guilt. And we're going to actually be doing the somatic and spiritual psychotherapy work to help you there. So thank you, Elvira. This has been amazing. Thank you for all the wisdom you always bring. I'm now, with having you as a co-host, I just feel so excited and so empowered. So I thank you so much for your beautiful light.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Like I said, it was something that had been in my mind for a long time, and I'm glad we're finally doing it.
Oh, and it feels so natural and beautiful. So thank you. So, of course, if you all found this episode helpful, please subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, share a comment, write a question down. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. I did also link how to get in touch with Elvira. Should you have any questions, you can directly message her as well. All of your engagement helps spread this message of movement of healing, generational healing to women worldwide. So we thank you for listening. Until next time, remember your inherent worth and your sovereign power. Sat Nam.